Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm your host, George Almasri. On this episode, I interviewed Dylan Suitor, who is an experienced real estate agent, investor, and entrepreneur. He is consistently a top-rated Oakville and Burlington real estate agent. He's partnered with a trusted colleague a few years ago, and that has led to investing in over 1,500 doors for more than $250 million in shared real estate holdings across Ontario and Canada. On this episode, we talked about playing Monopoly in real life, why you should sell smaller properties and reallocate your funds, Dylan's natural progression to commercial multifamily, how to avoid over-leveraging, and we talked a little bit about the commercial CMHC programs that are available. We also touched on an event that he's hosting, and there is an exclusive promo code that you can use to get 20% off. So if you just take a look at the show notes, you can see what that code is if you're interested in joining the event. And I just want to remind you to leave us a review. A 5-star review would be appreciated on whatever platform you listen on. Make sure to share this with a friend, somebody who could take advantage of the information that we're sharing and apply it into their lives to become well off. And then finally, if you want to connect with me to talk about some multi-unit opportunities, we have some pretty cool ones for 10-plus unit buildings across Southern Ontario. So you can reach out to me by going to welloff.ca. You can book a call there, or reach out to me on Instagram, welloffx. There you go. Enjoy the episode. All right, I'm here with Dylan Suitor. Dylan, it's the second time you come on the show. First time we met in Oakville. Now we're at my office here in Vaughan, which I believe you're involved in, right? You're like, I don't know the full details, but I think you and Sandy and some other guys are involved in this owning this brokerage, right?
Yeah, man. Personal development. Launched KWIP and grew that thing, and then the region came and asked us and said, you guys need to own a market center. So we ended up launching. This was the first ever Keller Williams launched through the Young Professionals division.
Okay, cool. And how is that going? Like, in terms of where we're at for as an office, KW Legacies, the growth and everything in the last year or so, is that in line with what you guys projected, or is it a bit different?
Well, I think that everyone involved, from Sandy, myself, to Anna, and the leadership team, their projections are always going to be really aggressive. And so I think that they're kind of moonshot numbers that we were kind of planning on. But Legacies is still in the top 3 in Canada for growth, which has been a magical accomplishment. And it's been really quite fun to watch. I also bought a brokerage downtown Toronto as well. And I've been able to compare the new launch to the already existing and turnover and whatnot. It's been fun to do A/B testing on it.
Is that co-elevation?
Yes.
Okay. So is that just out of curiosity, is that kind of more of what you want to do? Do you want to get involved in owning more brokerages, or do you think you want to grow your team moving forward? Do you want to just own a lot of assets?
Not a chance. Real estate? I want nothing to do with brokerages. I love everyone in the brokerage world, but I'll be honest, realtors are a pain in the butt, including me, and I'm sure you. Yeah. And we have this. It's quite interesting to look at a realtor mindset and what we do and what we accomplish. It's quite funny to work with, but I'm at the point now where I'm really, 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 really enjoying multifamily and larger multifamily and adding zeros to stuff. And I've created an incredible team that allows me to grow my portfolio, but also take investors that never thought they could own apartment buildings. I remember I was growing up as a kid, and I was walking down the street, and I was probably less than 10 years old, and looked up at a big building, and I'm like, well, that must be some big corporation or something that owns that. But to know that that's actually an achievable goal, and now my team's able to take anyone there that wants to go there, to me, I'm actually really invested in the market center from an investment standpoint. So one of the things that KW teaches is that the OP should be the one that teaches wealth and creates wealth for people. So when I look at what I want to be doing every day, it is really that OP role. I don't want to be managing the office and dealing with agents on a daily basis. I want to be talking about wealth, whether it's for my own agents, it's for the agents in the office, it's for agents that are outside. I'd say about half my clients now that buy buildings off of me are actually realtors. Right. And some of the biggest names that you would ever think of in Ontario and in Canada are actually clients of mine, because the multifamily space is scary, and I built a pretty incredible team around me to make it possible to get into and scale through it. Yeah,
for sure. I've actually dealt with some of your team as well, because I'm looking to get into that space as well. But let's talk about the concept of monopoly, which we were kind of touching on a little bit. So what does that concept mean to you?
You know what? I think that it's always great to relate something to something, and everyone knows Monopoly. I mean, I think it's probably the most popular board game in the world. Maybe Yahtzee, but one of those two, if you want to call Yahtzee a board game. So I think with Monopoly, you travel around the world or travel around the board, and you start off with smaller houses or start smaller properties that are a little more inexpensive and no houses on them. You work your way around, and as you get to the end, you get to Boardwalk and Park Place, which are the fancy streets, and so those are kind of the higher end neighborhoods to buy property in. And I think that's what a lot of us do when we're buying investment properties. Is we'll start with what we can afford. We may do a $200,000 to $300,000 flip or wholesale because we can get in, and then we'll work our way up to the duplex conversion, the triplex conversion, maybe the fourplex conversion, and then quite often we get hit a ceiling, and we're like, that's the furthest we can go. And so I relate that to those green houses that you buy. And so Monopoly, it allows you to buy 4 green houses before you buy that one red hotel. Mm-hmm. And so as you're moving around the board, I think that represents the different areas within an area that you could purchase, whether that is Ontario or it's Canada or it's in the States, whatever that may be. And you're kind of acquiring based on different values and different prices. And the ones that you pay more for, you usually get a bigger return on. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's necessarily accurate in the real world. I think that you can pay a little less and get better returns for ROIs in the world we're living in. But the big piece that Monopoly that really makes sense is that you get to 4 and then you can't go any further. You have to either buy more properties on that street and add 4 houses there, or you go to the apartment building space. And so what I'm actually doing with clients now is clients that have 3 or more. There's very few that have 2 or 1 property that can actually extract the equity and make a Monopoly play work in real life. But usually those that have 3 or more properties, 3, 4, 5, or up to 10. I've had some clients with 25, but they usually hit a financing threshold, and that's where multifamily makes total sense. So we'll sell off those 3, 4, 5 properties, create 7 figures or more in equity that we can work with, and then take that into the multifamily space, the exact same thing.
Now, why would somebody want to do that? Let's say they've owned these properties for a couple years, 5, 10 years. They've got good cash flow. Everything's stable. Why would they go out and sell these properties to get something bigger, get into the multifamily space?
So many answers for that question, but I'll start with one, and it's very fair because, I mean, we just saw another interest rate increase. Mm-hmm. So I think that what I do when I play this Monopoly, I actually have a spreadsheet that I get people to fill out ahead of time. I was doing like a 2-hour in-person meeting on a whiteboard, getting all that information, extracting it, and then I said, let's just make this simple. So we created a system around it where we'll send them an Excel file. They'll fill out the Excel file, includes cash, RSPs, TFSAs, so on and so forth. Basically like an overall net worth statement, and then also kind of goals on why they're investing. And what I found, there was a consistent pattern recognition, pattern utilization, pattern creation is what Tony Robbins taught me. And so we're picking up on these patterns. And what I found was a lot of these people either had variable rate mortgages and they cash flowed when they were at 2%, but they don't at 7 or 6. And those who didn't, they locked in their mortgages. Most of them come up for renewal in 2024, 2025, 2026. And so what we found was maybe they make sense today because they locked in on a 2 or 3% rate, but they're not going to make sense in a year when they have to renew their mortgage at 6 or 7, unless interest rates come down substantially, which I don't foresee them coming back down to 2% anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Maybe you disagree. Maybe some of your listeners disagree, but I think that's an overall kind of assumption that 85% of people think that the interest rates are probably going to stay a little bit higher for a while. So one big reason would be that. Another one would be that rental rates have gotten to a point now where your dollar of rent per dollar of asset owned is so small. And so when you start looking at let's call it a duplex on the Hamilton Mountain, $850,000, $900,000 is what I've seen some of those really clean ones go for. What are you renting that for? $4,200 to $4,500 max? Like if you're doing really well on that? Well, I remember not so long ago, we used to buy for $400,000, put $100,000 in, it was worth $600,000, and you rent for $35,000 to $4,000. Mm-hmm. So we've seen our prices go up 40% from a value standpoint, but we've only seen our rents go up 20%. Now, rents have climbed, but they haven't climbed at the same pace as values have. And there's a threshold. People rent because they can't afford for the most part, or there's other strategies, but majority of renters can't afford to buy or don't know they can afford to buy. And so they hit a ceiling of what they can actually pay on a monthly basis. And you can't see them increasing rents by 10, 20, 30% a year like we've seen over the past few years. I think there's also a lot of politics brought into that. Yeah. And so the last piece that I'll state is that someone can own, I actually have a real life example I'm happy to get into if you want, where I have a client that bought 3 properties off of me. She bought more than that, but she bought 3 properties that she was willing to sell. It was a single family, a duplex, and a triplex in 2019. Mm-hmm. And we were able to sell those assets. She was able to net $800,000 after capital gains and all of her improvements and her selling fees, get her initial down payment and deposit back on all those properties, and turn that into a 12 unit where the down payment will actually be $600,000. Mm-hmm. Straight to CMHC, straight good financing that option that way. So she's able to get her initial 20% back on those 3 assets that she paid, plus any renovations she paid, plus pay all her taxes and me to sell them, and then take $200,000 on top of that back into an investment account and still turn those 6 doors into 12 doors in a multifamily space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to these, the financing, or sorry, the interest rate on the residential side, so prime is 6.7 at this point when we're recording. How is it different on the commercial side? Like, I know you're going to get potentially lower rates if you go through a CMHC program, MLI Select, that sort of thing. But for somebody who's not doing that, you're still up there when it comes to rate. So how is it that you're able to make the numbers work on that end?
So I think that the idea would be whether you go CMHC, MLI Select, you do the traditional CMHC program.
Mm-hmm.
Like the traditional CMHC program is 85% loan to value at a 40-year amortization with a 1.2 to 1.3 debt service, depending on if you're doing a 5 or a 10-year commitment. I also think that you're locking in, another benefit of it is that you're locking in your rate on that, right? So you're going to buy a 5-year or a 10-year rate, which you can now guarantee your rents for, you can guarantee your income for, because you're not going to have to worry too much about it. And the rent increase you get of 2.5% a year, whatever that may be, 2.4, 2.6, whatever it is, that ultimately goes straight to bottom line during that 5 or 10-year commitment on that. Mm-hmm. I think the amortization is a huge point because you can't get to even 40-year amortization through residential financing. And so if you're looking at a 25 or a 30-year amortization for your residential financing, you add an extra 10 years, extrapolate it over an additional period of time, and you can drive additional cash flows, which I think is a real big reason why a lot of people are investing is for cash flow.
Yeah, okay. Just out of curiosity, what was your monopoly journey like? Because I know a couple years ago you were kind of just starting out, you did a flip, but then things went wrong, and then I forget what happened exactly, but you ended up Airbnb-ing the property. So how did you go from that to the multifamily commercial multifamily space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we covered last time I was on was a property I went to flip, and then the market dropped in 2017. I didn't want to take the $200,000 haircut that I saw, so I Airbnb'd it. But for more on that, you go back to the other episode we talked about. But I think what I did was I didn't understand fully what investing was. That property I bought in my own name. I didn't have it in a corporate name. I didn't know the tax benefits. I didn't know the accounting benefits. I didn't have the knowledge. And since 2015, I've spent 6 figures on education. Mm-hmm. More recently, I'm over $500,000 a year on education as of 2022. And so I think that it's really important to understand different nuances and creative ways. And so that, going back to your prior question, if I may for a second, I want to bring back the difference in financing when you look at direct comparison and income approach. And so your multifamily is an income approach financing solution, whereas your traditional, like, what are your comps? If you do a residential deal, whether it's as an investor on a duplex or you do it as a primary residence or your residential clients, they're going to ask, okay, show me 3 to 5 comps or show me 12 comps, whatever that may be. And that's a very common analogy is comps, comparables. You can't go and find 2 30-unit apartment buildings beside each other very often. Mm-hmm. So to say what's a direct comparison is next to impossible. So they have to change the financing structure of it or the underwriting structure of it, which we use NOI and the income approach. Mm-hmm. We take your income and then we utilize a cap rate based on what city it's in and what the current shape is in, and then you get your value that way. Mm-hmm. So what I found was I was doing a lot of different properties. The main reason I went into multifamily and my progression into multifamily space was nothing to do with my investments. It was actually to do with my clients. Mm-hmm. And it was because a lot of my clients were doing duplex conversions. On the Hamilton Mountain was a very common one. I think 2018 I sold 57 bungalows that we converted to duplex conversions. And that was actually the start of Conduit Asset Management, which we'll get to in a second as well. But what I did was I had a large client list that had 500 or $1 million or whatever it was. And they're like, I want to go buy 3 or 4 or 5 duplexes. Mm-hmm. And I was able to manage their financing through some different lenders that we used that were really strong in that area. I was able to use great architects that could do drawings and get permits approved pretty easily, be creative, and then contractors that were able to do this turnkey solution for clients. But when you're buying residential properties, 1 to 5 units, 1 to 4 units, whatever you want to call it, you're usually getting a conditional on finance and home inspection, and it's usually based on your personal income. Mm-hmm. Then you hear this whole like ceiling where a lot of people talk about like, oh, you can only have this many mortgages. And I know that like RBC may let you get to 10, TD and Scotia are usually 5. Sometimes they'll look at properties, sometimes they'll look at doors. I know CIBC was allowing, I don't know if they do this anymore, but CIBC was allowing you to have 5 properties as long as, and they didn't care how many other properties you had with other lenders. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of the last major bank we'd go to get them up to 10 or 12 or 15 properties. That was without getting into your monoline and your private lenders. So that's where a lot of people were comfortable. But what I found was when, again, going back to that initial example of buying for $400,000, putting $100,000 in to make it a 2-unit, and then refinancing at $600,000, you got most of, if not all, your money back. You had $100,000 or more in equity creation, so you made money, and then you could roll it into the next property. And you didn't hit a financial ceiling of affordability on that because you had an income large enough, or your JVs had an income large enough for a while. And so that made sense to me until I had clients hitting 5 or 7 or 10 of these 2-unit properties. And then I found that their exit financing fell on its face. And this was the same for me too. Like even now I'm struggling with some primary financing solutions for my smaller inventory. I've got 161 houses or so that I actually don't have financing solutions for all of them. I'm working on a couple of larger ones now with CMBS and Scotia Wealth and whatnot that are coming together, which is nice. But we've always had that challenge when you're going over 10 properties that people want to see an income, and I can't personally cover the cost of 160 properties if everyone walked out tomorrow. But banks want to see you do that, even though it doesn't make any logical sense. And so I knew the next progression for my clients in the real estate space was going to be to get a little bit bigger. That was going to be whether it's 6, 7, 8 units, or it was going to be 30 units, or it was going to be 100 units. That was really their choice, and that's where the whole monopoly concept came available more recently. So the progression for me was I don't want to sell something until I can do it myself. And so I remember I bought my first bungalow. I converted my first bungalow to a 2-unit. I did it in Burlington, which made total sense. The financials didn't make sense, but I lived in it, so it made sense. I went through the whole process. I went to the committee of adjustments. I sat in and listened to the elderly complaining about the trees that were going to be cut down for a new construction home. Yeah. Let's not get into the politics of it, but I did every step of it. And so I understood that, okay, well, in order for me to get to a building, to sell a building, I'm going to have to do a building. And a unique opportunity came up where someone asked me to partner on a 32-unit building. And it was majority vacant. And I had no idea. I was like, I'll do this traditional buying like I do with a house and we'll be okay. Well, I looked at every lender I could possibly talk to, every financial guru that said they could finance multifamily buildings. And luckily, I ended up having a family member that was able to close in cash the day of closing, because otherwise would have defaulted because we had no mortgage in place. And so the day of closing, he actually called and said, these are my terms. This is the interest rate. This is the equity component. And I'll stand beside you and I'll fund the whole thing. And if we can find a solution between now and the completion, great. We'll exit out. Well, we are refinancing that this month, and I bought that in 2019. So that one was not the projections we were planning on, but I think it's important to recognize that closed November 2019, and now it's being refinanced in June 2023.
Yeah.
So our $800,000 reno budget on a 32-unit building got completely blown out of the water, but I failed forward every aspect of it, and I learned a ton through that process. And my more recent acquisitions now, I'm looking at getting a 50 to 60% second mortgage VTB, a 50 to 60% first mortgage from a fairly reputable lender that's willing to give me basically BMO today rates on a commercial loan on a 12-month period. My intention would be to turn some of these units or add some of the additional units and exit through CMHC in 12 to 36 months. So I have so many other financial opportunities available now because of the education I've learned, and even opportunities off market. That property is probably going to have 30 to 40 offers on it, and it's completely off market. And the reason it'll have 30 to 40 offers is because it's over 100 units. It's a property that every fund and hedge fund will try and get involved in. I was actually signing the offer when I walked into the office just now, a couple minutes ago. And I'm actually, because of my relationships with off-market opportunities and commercial agents, and they know that I can close, they know that I can finance, they know I can take these projects to completion, they give me these opportunities, whether they wholesale or they're off market. And a lot of times I get them under value. I'm going to buy this, we put an offer in for $20 million, maybe I pay 21, but I think if it went to market and actually went into a bid date later this week or next week, you might go to 25, 26. Like there's a lot of meat on the bone in that project. And so the progression of someone doing some some Airbnb because I fell on my face on a flip, all the way to now looking at north of 100-unit residential building where we're going to turn it over a 3 to 5 year plan and strategy is something that I can now pretty much talk to every level of. I do not have a client that has bought a 100-plus unit building off of me, but I have a number of clients who have bought double-digit buildings, so 18, 22, 25, 45, 48, so on and so forth. Right. And so I have done a number of 8-figure deals, and I've done a number of double-digit door properties, and I'm getting into the 100 to see where it's at, and I'm looking at possibly development. So I like to be that trailblazer for my clients and go and fail through it first to find the problems that I can have. We also know that every project's going to have some different problems. I haven't seen everything, nor will I ever see everything, but that's where Conduit Asset Management comes in that we're ultimately your active partner without charging 50% of the project for the rest of life. We just charge a fee upon the end, and we actually allow people to get into the multifamily space they may not be able to through our monopoly strategy or other capital they may have. And we basically work alongside. I've got my team that does all of my management of all of my buildings to get them the highest and best use, including our architects, our environmentals, our BCAs, all the different terminology you need to get used to in the multifamily space, or not if you just hire us and trust us, is set up for you and done for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a couple things here that we touched on that I kind of wanted to dive into. So I heard you say that you were doing a VTB in second position for 50 to 60% loan to value. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing that. I'm assuming because you're gonna go. Are you going to CMHC for first? In that case?
So in that case, my offer is stronger because that seller is looking for a quicker close. Mm-hmm. So the seller's willing to offer me a VTB for a quicker close. So the way I wrote the offer to start is a 50 to 60. I think it's a 50% VTB in first position. I know that I can close on that property in 45 days with 50% down from my family member that closed the other one. Because we've cycled about, I found out the other day, it's 27.9 million. We've cycled through apartment buildings in 3 deals. And he'll have most of that back. Spare about 4.5 million. He's made an interest on it, but he'll get most of that back before the end of this calendar year. A lot of it coming back in June and July this year. So now he wants to replace that, redistribute it. And so he's willing to put 10, 12 million into this, which is kind of my worst case scenario on this deal. So worst case scenario on the deal, I have a 5%, 12-month interest only VTB at 50% loan to value. And within that 12-month period, I'm going to find a lender that'll give me probably 75 of purchase and 75 of renovation budget. Maybe someone that goes to 85 of purchase from a private if I'm willing to pay a bit higher interest. Or if I want to keep it a little more conservative, under 60%, I'll be able to get the best terms. So I know there's a lot of different financing options. We're actually in the process right now. My team is actually modeling out 5 different financing strategies. But once I go firm on this deal, which is likely in a week, we're doing a really quick review of it. We already have the environmental assessment we need. The appraisal doesn't matter to me because I can run a model and know what it's worth at the end. And I'm not going to take it to CMHC for probably 3 years. And there's a lot of lenders that will invest based on net worth, which my cousin and I have, but they'll also lend based on pro formas and what we know we're going to do. And there's a lot of additional units that can be made here, which are automatic turn units. There's some 3 bedrooms that can be N13 very easily and over 1,000 square feet turned into 2 units. There's a lot of different strategies we can compile into this to know the value is going to be there. So my intention of this is I have the 12-month VTB. If he's willing to take that to second position, even if he wants a higher interest rate or a lower loan to value, I'd probably keep that for the whole 12 months. So I'd put our first mortgage in for 12 months. I'd put him in second position if he's willing to accept it, whether it be a higher rate, different terms. We'll negotiate that on firming next week if that's the route we go. But there's lots of options for financing these kind of things. If he says absolutely not, then I'll go with a different lender that'll do an AB term and I'll get higher leverage on that. Or I'll get someone that does construction financing for me and have most of the initial capital we're going to spend down on the property.
So speaking of construction financing, leverage, all this, do you ever have a fear that you may be over leveraging? And if not, what makes you feel confident that you're not over leveraging?
So I think that the easiest answer to that is I know the value of this asset. I really strongly and firmly believe in the value of real estate in Ontario for long term. I know that the LTB has been a total pain. I know that there are a lot of political issues that are at hand right now. I know that permits are taking forever. I know tenant turnover is a problem. I know there's all kinds of things against that. There's a big push to this socialism economy or socialist economy it's really hard for that capitalist type mindset. But at the end of the day, I know that there was over 1 million people that came into Canada last year. No, they didn't get passports, but they came into Canada. A lot of them came to Toronto and Vancouver. That urban sprawl of went from Toronto to Hamilton, Windsor, up to Barrie, out east, wherever you want to go, Kingston. That urban sprawl continues to happen. And I know that our rents are going to at least stay steady. They're not going to go down. Maybe they go up, maybe they don't. But if I run a model on it right now to say what's today's rents and what's today's rents if I do a very conservative turn in the next 3 years and I lock in an interest rate for 3 years and I buffer with the amount of money I need, a lot of these lenders will do interest reserves. So they'll give me a loan that'll include 3 years of interest already, and they'll just pull from that reserve. And they know that at the end of the 3 years, they're going to get bought out. There are so many options for me to be able to exit that in 3 years, whether it's a sale again at a discounted rate, but it's still a profit for me, whether it is a refinance through the existing lender on a renewal for an extra year or two if I need an extension. Maybe it's a refinance direct to CMHC, whether that's MLI Select or a different program, or maybe it is that the partner that I have, which is a really easy answer, buys it out in cash. I mean, quite frankly, that is an option as well. Mm-hmm. And I know of a couple of people that are now working for multi-billionaires where their comments are, I don't want 20 or 30% IRR. I don't want your commercial to res conversion. I don't want your LTV issues. I want a very guaranteed 6, 7, 8% return. Mm-hmm. And if I own that asset in mostly cash and use 20, 30% leverage, but I'm very heavy cash in, I know I'm getting 7% the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of wealth building block that some of these uber wealthy want. Yeah. And that's the kind of mindset that my family member and my partners are actually kind of moving towards on this particular deal.
Yeah, it seems to be as people become wealthier, they care less about those big numbers, those big ROI numbers. They just want more stability. And you touched a little bit on some of the issues with investing in Ontario, the landlord-tenant board, all these things. Has that ever made you want to invest maybe in some of the blue states and, take everything down there and start investing where it's a lot easier, or you just feel pretty happy and confident with Ontario and basically investing over here?
So I think Ontario's gotten much worse from a capitalist and an investor standpoint of late. May not be popular to believe, but I don't necessarily disagree that they need to be. I don't think the way they're doing it is the correct way. I think there's other solutions to create affordable housing and create a thriving economy that makes logical sense. But I think that of late, like I would say if I backtrack 3 years or even 2 years, the blue state concept of going south, I've always been interested in the U.S., but the U.S. usually has a harder fall than Canada. Mm-hmm. And Gary Keller spoke from stage a few years ago at Family Reunion and said, like, here's Canada just doing the thing they do, and they've got this strong banking system, and there's personal guarantees upon personal guarantees, and people can't just go bankrupt and walk next door and own the next home the next day. Like, there's a lot of things in the U.S. that allow for bigger crashes and bigger falls to happen. Canada, even when it does have falls, that kind of bounces back quick, or there's some changes that happen. I don't know if we're going to see what we're going to see right now, but my big reason for not going to the U.S. of late was because I was waiting for something like now to happen. And with interest rates continue to increase, I think there's still a little bit more of a shakeup coming in the U.S. I think there's probably a little bit more in the north as well, up in Canada. And so I think that we're in that time now where I'm very seriously considering the U.S. And when you're looking, I mean, Grant Cardone was on stage a couple weeks ago, Alex Rodriguez, Brad Sumrock, some of these larger these multifamily investors that have 10, 20, 30,000 doors in the U.S., and they're all sitting on the sideline with dry powder. And the reason they're sitting on the side with dry powder is the exact question you asked me a minute ago with, what do you think about overextending and how close do you get to overextending? I think you get to a point where if you want to scale, you either have to use really conservative numbers, which is what Conduit does with all of our clients that are looking to play Monopoly and get into the space, or you have deep-pocketed people with dry powder on the sidelines where if you need to put $1 million in, you can. You need to put $2 million in, you can. Because there's a lot of people right now in north and south of the border that don't have that extra 500 or million or 2 million to bail them out of a problem and have overextended themselves. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot more of these power sales. You're going to see a lot more of these assets going under. But I think there's such a strong investment opportunity that you're not actually going to see values dip too much. You just want to try and find those opportunities before they go power of sale, because if someone loses a property to power of sale or foreclosure, there's all kinds of additional fees. So if you can find that property before they do, let's just say that this is going to go foreclose for $1 million and the asset's really worth $1.5 million. If you go find that seller and say, I'll give you $1.2 million, they're going to pay the $200,000, or maybe they might even get $8 million. Maybe they get nothing out of that asset. But if you find them early enough and you can say, hey, your asset's worth $1.5 million, we both know that. But if you wait another 3 weeks, your asset's worth nothing. Mm-hmm. And so instead of letting it go power sale at $1 million from a bank, let me buy it off you for $1.2 million. I make my 300, you still get 200, and we're all happy. There's a win-win in there that everyone can win and everyone can make sense of, whether that's north or south of the border.
Yeah, being somebody who has a team that's really active in the commercial multifamily space, who's always got off-market opportunities, these types of things, are you starting to see more people that are getting really close to defaulting? Maybe they bought a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe they got a bridge loan or private financing or something, and now it's up for renewal and they just can't make the numbers work?
I think there's still about 18 months where that's really going to fall apart. And I think the government knows that. And so even the Bank of Canada announcements where they're continuing to increase rates, my concern with them increasing rates is they're just going to shorten that 18 months of what people can do. Because if you're on a variable, a lot of these multifamily owners have a prime plus. Well, now prime just went up another 25 basis points, or goes 50 or goes 100, whatever it may be. Now you're going to find those people really in crunch time. And I think a lot of the CMHC underwriting that changes on June 18th is also going to have a big change, because a lot of people, their only exit is CMHC. Mm-hmm. And it is that uninsured, it is that insured mortgage that gets you to 40 or 50% loan to value at different debt services. I think when a lot of those start to find out they can't actually get approved or they are $500,000 underwater, I think that's when you're going to see a lot more of these distressed sales come on the market. But I think that there's such a long time in Canada before a power of sale or foreclosure will actually happen that I think there's an opportunity to kind of swing in and grab some of those opportunities while still helping those sellers that may lose it.
Yeah.
I have seen some people in that condition. I have seen a couple power sales go up. I got an offer on one right now for a client, but it's nowhere near as much as I think we're going to find in the next 18 months.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So with regards to the CMHC exit, so refinancing with CMHC, I know obviously you're not a mortgage broker, but why have you come across any scenarios where they don't approve it for some reason, the CMHC loan or the insurance, I should say?
I know the MLI program better than probably 70% of mortgage brokers because it's all I've looked at. I had a mental breakdown in November 2021 when they first talked about it. So MLI Select came out March 7th of 2022, and they were accepting on March 7th, but they didn't actually pick up and review any files till March 10th. I know those dates to a T because I remember the meltdown I have. It was end of November of the year before. And I was on with one of my First National reps. It was a VP of financing at First National, who at that time held the most CMHC loans in Canada. They were about 40% of CMHC. I was on with him as well, my chief of staff. And I liked the 85 and 40 because it gave us that flexibility. But then he told me the new criteria of what they were releasing come March 7th, and I had just lost my mind. I felt like I was in Pokemon. I had to catch them all. I literally wanted every building. I'm like, I want them all. This makes so much sense. Let's do it. Well, apparently everyone else did the same. Mm-hmm. And so CMHC ended up funding in their first 12 months of MLI 4 times what they planned on funding. 60% of all CMHC loans were in the MLI space in 2022 to 2023 of that March to March. And so what I ended up finding was towards the end of that year, they started changing their underwriting. And then all of a sudden they made an announcement that MLI was changing. And how they changed it was they increased your cost by 155 basis points on an MLI. They made a cost increase on the old program as well, the 40 and 85% loan to value. So there was some extra costs that went up, but they also stated that they were going to change some underwriting criteria. And what I've seen a lot in the last 6 months is them using capitalization rates that are not cap rates that you're going to see on market every day. They're not what someone would sell it for. So now what I'm doing when I'm talking to clients is, okay, well, if you went to sell this property, maybe it's a 4.5 cap. But if you're refinancing this property, CMHC is going to apply a 5.25 cap. Yeah. But on top of that 5.25 cap, they're also going to apply a 5% vacancy. Go find me a city in Ontario, in Southern Ontario, that has a 5% vacancy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. We don't have vacancy. And so they're using some underwriting metrics that are really conservative. They're adding $50 per appliance per unit per year in their underwriting metrics to reduce your NOI. So they're reducing your NOI by adding additional expenses that they can. More recently, I had a 15% increase in taxes because it wasn't reassessed yet. The only way around that is to actually hire a third-party consultant to go and tell you what your new taxes are going to be, or work with the city to get something in proof that you're not going to. But a lot of these timelines that CMHC give you don't allow for you to get those timelines. Mm-hmm. So you don't have that extra variance unless you're planning for it ahead of time. And that's where, again, Conduit Asset Management has been able to help me with grants and applications. And so what we're actually finding is that these underwriting metrics are getting much more stringent, and that's what I heard about when I first went into CMHC. I remember Mark Loeffler talked to me about it. He said, I don't do any CMHC because it's way too hard to underwrite anything. Mm-hmm. Well, now you kind of have to if you're staying in Ontario because the debt doesn't make sense otherwise. Yeah. And you have to go through some of the bumps and lumps. So acquiring direct to CMHC is tough, but doing an exit through CMHC is still possible and it's still doable. I think you just got to get a little bit more conservative on your underwriting metrics, which we do in all of our modeling now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes sense. Let's dive into this event that you're hosting on August 1st. Why don't you tell us what it's about, what your involvement is, and all that?
I'd love to. I appreciate you bringing that up. I think that what you may have heard, if you heard the pattern recognition, pattern utilization, pattern creation, is that I've done a ton of education. Since day one, it's all about growth. I mean, I'm often asked, how were you able to grow as fast as you did and build a portfolio as fast as you did? Well, number one, I tackle fear daily. I run into that uncertainty and I kind of merge ahead. And I do run into spots that I don't have full certainty on stuff, which is terrifying at times. But I think it's also an investment in myself. And there's a consistent theme on podcasts that I used to listen to years ago where it's like, what's the best investment you could ever make? Well, the investment you can make is on yourself. Mm-hmm. Or what would you do with your first $50,000 if all you had was $50,000? Well, how would you invest it? Well, I'd invest it in myself. Yeah. I've done that since day one. And the first course I went to was the flipping formula, and it was $72,000. And I did not get the value out of it, I can tell you that much. But what I did get out of it was learning about rain. And I became a RAIN member, which then turned into a So Right member, which then turned into Right Club member. And then I turned into the preferred realtor for the Right Club. And if I look at that $72,000 cost, I look at the return on investment over that period of time, most people have said I was insane to put it on a credit card and not even have it, which I was. But then when I look at the actual return of being the preferred agent at the Right Club, that probably made it possible for me to sell the 57 duplex conversions in 2018. And you look at the return on investment from what I did at that point applied to the 72 grand. I think I made 500,000 or 600,000 that year on that. That alone paid itself in dividends. And so as I look at all the different courses and training that I'm part of right now, the one that has inspired me the most is Tony Robbins. And it's not just Tony Robbins because he's this guy with big teeth and he's this massive head that's on Family Guy eating people, which is obviously a satire that's quite funny. But what it really comes down to is that Tony Robbins, when you get to actually see him and know him, is he covers every aspect of life. He covers health, he covers wealth, he covers relationship, he covers business, he covers overcoming obstacles, and he has a system or a tangible tool around every single part of it. And so what I love about KW is the systems and models that Gary's taught to grow your business, the millionaire real estate agent, the millionaire real estate investor. These are very tangible and clear models step by step on how to do it. Tony does the same thing in a bit of different light with some really impactful and powerful tools. And so I'm actually bringing Tony's brother-in-law and top trainer to Burlington, Ontario, August 1st. And I'm doing this because I absolutely love what I've learned over the last 4 years of being in Tony's world. I was most recently at his house last May, just a month ago, and kind of hung out with 40 Platinum Lions. And it was life-changing. I had 92 people come to UPW last year in Florida, and of those 92, 9 of them joined Tony's Platinum Partnership. And when I have conversations with those people, their world has changed so immensely that you can't even explain it. So I wanted to bring the cheapest possible option to people that they could get exposure to this. And if that's all they ever do is a one-day session in Burlington, so be it. But if it ends up turning into something more and you love it and you want to continue the journey, we made it really easy to do that as well. And it's all about what you want in your life. We're going to cover a little bit of the challenges that we're facing in today's economy, what we project the economy may do in the future, how we can overcome some of that work-life balance that people seem to have lost going through COVID, some of these challenges we've been faced with, really getting granular on that in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we're going to show you a very simple step-by-step tool to grow your business by up to 150% or more in 2024 that you can apply right away. And so I'm really excited to share that. Your podcast guests do get a discount. It's POD!1. And the URL is businessresults2023.ca. We'll share it all in the show notes. Yep. I'm really, really, really excited to do that. Really excited to bring it to everyone. And there are some VIP tickets available that essentially get you access to this event for free. And it also gives you access to the UPW event in Dallas at a rate that I can't even post online because it's so low. And I've been able to do this because of my relationship with the Tony Robbins partnership and their family. And yeah, so this is ultimately business results training, and it's a one-day version of what they charge $35,000 to corporations to do. And we're open up. We have 700 seats available in the Burlington Performing Arts Center, and got 20 vendor sponsors. So a lot of the building stuff that we're talking about today, I have all my key partners there, my appraisers, environmental companies, financing, staging, so on and so forth. They're all there. So you can talk to them. They're all exclusive. They're the people that I use. And so you can have conversations with each of them if you want to get in the multifamily space. And we also have the networker packages available, which bring your ticket price to the absolute lowest you're going to find, which is $99 a ticket. And so people can reach out if they want to bring their clients. So a lot of realtors are reaching out and buying a pack of 20 tickets, and then they introduce it to their friends and family and their clients as one of their client events. And we allow you to brand it as your own. This isn't about me, it's about you and creating opportunity. And so we really want to just bring everything we've covered on this podcast today into one space. And I'm really, really excited about the event, August 1st.
Yeah, 700 seats. I think you'll fill that pretty fast.
I really hope so.
Yeah.
And I want the influence and impact of people. That's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, you're doing so many different things, and you're doing them at a high level. Just out of curiosity, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, do you have an end goal, sort of? Do you have a big vision? Do you have like a 5-year vision? Just out of curiosity.
A few years ago, I did have a 5-year vision. More recently, it's been kind of dialed down to 3. And I think the reason is, if you look at my team, Elevation Realty, I brought agents in, whether they were brand new or relatively new, and helped them scale and build investment portfolios and accomplish their personal and professional goals. That was a big focus. But what I realized is that my 5-year goal was too selfish. I could do a 3-year goal because I needed to have that vision for my team to make sure they knew a positive future. But when it got to 5 years, the people that I have in my ecosystem, the talent I have in my ecosystem, it's really up to them. Where do we want Elevation Realty going? Where do we want Conduit Asset Management going? Where do we want Grow Ontario Property management? Where do we want co-elevation realty brokerage going? This is really up to them to kind of put a little twist on, and it's leaving a bit of blank space for them to really cast their vision and implement it all and make a world big enough for everyone to accomplish it. So my big vision is just to continue to create a world big enough for everyone to live their best life. And what I would really want to say is in the next 12 months for me, I want to create an opportunity where I'm at $200,000 a month up to my holding co, which allows me to take about $300,000 a year personally, but it allows me to have about just north of $2 million to invest and diversify my portfolio, which we should be at before the end of the year.
Awesome. Before we end things, do you feel like there's any final messages, anything you want to share?
I think we've covered a lot today. I mean, obviously, you'll share in the show notes how to get a hold of me. I'll get my team to send that over. More than happy to talk to anyone about anything here. Find me on podcast. Find me August 1st. I'll be sitting outside. I'm not going to be in the event. I see a lot of it, so I'll be there to talk, and I'm happy to share. Really, what it comes down to is I just sharing, caring, and however we can grow together. Co-elevation was named because it's together everyone achieve more. How do we co-elevate, and how do we collaborate to create more opportunities? So all I'm looking for is good people that want to do amazing things and continue to push the limits, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome, Dylan. Thanks again for coming by. It's always nice having you on the show, and good luck with the event.
Awesome. Appreciate it.